All right. Hello everyone. Welcome to the August Water Conditions Monitoring Committee. My name is Emily Adrid and I work at CWCB. Today we have presentations from the Colorado Climate Center and NRCS. There are no announcements for me, but if anybody has an announcement that they'd like to make, now is the time. All right, hearing none. Russ, you are up. Feel free to start sharing your screen.
Okie doke. Okay. See that okay?
Yep.
Cool. And laser pointer. Good. Okay. Well, yeah, I will kind of go through our update here of where things stand around the state in terms of the climate and water over the last month or so since the last meeting. It was good seeing some of you here on the meeting at Water Congress last week. So a nice picture from there. So we'll start with the kind of rundown of the water year to date up to this point. And these first few slides will be conditions for the water year through the end of July. So obviously we're now almost close to the end of August somehow. So, this goes through the last full month, but then I'll show some August statistics in a minute. This is, so right, first 10 months of the water year from October through July. This map shows the ranking with respect to the 129-year record for temperature. And you can see most of the state is in this reddish color, which indicates it's in the top 10 warmest. So most of the state has had a top 10 warm water year through July, averaged up statewide. It was the 8th warmest October through July period, and the warmest of those first 10 months of the water year since 2018. You can see the rundown on the right of the different months throughout the year. July was actually not especially warm around the state, although it depends a little bit where you were. We had the very intense heat wave in the middle of the month, but with kind of cool conditions on either side of it. So it averaged out to be not that much warmer than average, but June was very warm, if you recall. Here's the same thing for precipitation. For the first 10 months of the water year, this is maybe a little less interesting. As you can see, most of the state is actually in kind of the middle of the historical distribution for precipitation for the October through July period, with a few exceptions. The San Luis Valley, for example, is having one of its wettest water years on record in the top 10. There's some dry spots on the Eastern Plains and up in the Northern Front Range there, and some kind of scattered pockets on the Western Slope. And again, so out of the 129 years, slightly below average statewide, 59th driest or 71st wettest. Now, of course, this kind of going for the water year as a whole is washing out some important details that we'll talk about here in a moment. July was drier than average across the state, 37th driest, but that followed a June that was relatively wet, especially in western Colorado. Here's the map showing just July, and in terms of the ranking, and so you can see, quite a few spots, not really any particularly wet spots in July, but a few pockets a little bit above average on the Eastern Plains and Southern Colorado, but some pockets that were quite dry in July, Northwest Colorado over to the Front Range through there. But of course, this is now, somewhat distant history as we are most of the way through August. Here's kind of the summary of July on the quadrant charts. So if you're not familiar with these, precipitation runs along the horizontal axis, temperature along the vertical axis. So you kind of get into four like that. And then the average conditions are these dash lines. So we get four quadrants where the upper left is the drought quadrant, the warm and dry. warm and wet in the upper right, cool and dry in the lower left, cool and wet in the lower right. So for July statewide, which is the star, shows 2024, you can kind of see where that fits with the historical distribution. It was on the dry side, but not especially warm, warmer than the 20th century average, but actually cooler than the most recent 30-year average when averaged up statewide. So kind of see where that fits. And then here's the same thing, but for the water year as a whole through July, the October through July period. And here we can see, again, the water year through July, very, very warm. That eighth warmest value that we saw, and just a little bit drier than the long-term average when we kind of look at it from this statewide perspective. So yeah, not up with some of these really bad drought years, 2002 or 1934, 2018, 2012, but definitely on the warm side. And okay, so let's look at August so far, since we're most of the way through the month now. This is the departure from the average temperature in August, and you can see most of the state has been warmer than average for the month of August. Parts of southern Colorado have been well above average. That's like 3 to 4 degrees Fahrenheit above average, which is quite notable for a summer month. With the 2 to 3 degrees above average across much of the state. The exceptions being like the northeastern plains have been near to a little bit cooler than average, a few pockets in the mountains. But on the whole, it's been a warm month, and it looks like we will close out the month that way for the most part as well. Here's precipitation now for August, and this kind of tells an interesting story. So this is precipitation amounts in the color shading, and then also individual observers in the dots there. So a few things maybe jump out here. One is the northeast corner of the state, which has been quite wet. So you can see some 6 to 7 inch totals up in the northeast corner for August. This is through yesterday morning. And then also the San Juan Mountains have been very wet in August. So there's an observer there with 7.6 inches in August. I'm sure there's some higher totals up on slightly higher elevations there. So quite a ample month of rainfall for the San Juans, and to a lesser extent some of the other mountain ranges. A couple other things to note: the Front Range area, much of it continues to be fairly dry, and then some dry pockets in the southeast. But then in between, some areas that have had heavy rain as well, like through Elbert County, a lot of 4 to 5 inch totals through there. But then very nearby, places that have only had an inch or inch and a half over the month up to this point. And here's the same data, but now as percent of average for August thus far. And we can see again, most of western Colorado is 170 to twice or more the typical August precipitation. So it's been a very healthy monsoon season for those areas. And again, the northeastern corner, quite wet, but a lot of places in the southeast that are 30 to 50% of average for August. And August is often the wettest month of the year for southeast Colorado. So very spotty precipitation there. Some places that have gotten the thunderstorms and gotten plenty of rain, but other places that have been drying out in the southeast. Okay, so just wanted to kind of go through a couple of maybe interesting tidbits or analyses for the summer up to this point. One is related to heat waves. So this, if you're kind of interested in diving into this even further, we had two of our blog posts in July focused on heat waves. So one on the heat wave that was in the middle of July, and then one that Peter wrote that was kind of more general look at heat waves. So this is the kind of ranking of the one that happened in mid-July, like from the 14th to the 17th of July, which in the forecast looked like it might break a lot of records and ended up not quite reaching that level, but it was uh, the fourth most intense 4-day heat wave for the Pikes Peak region here, and the seventh hottest heat wave for the Northern Front Range. So that one was quite notable. And then there was more heat at the end of July into early August as well. And so if we kind of look at this now updated through data from most of this summer, uh, if we use the definition that we used in the climate change report, looking at 4-day heat waves, and that definition was basically the 4-day period that on average would have been exceeded one time per year in the late 20th century. So it's sort of the hottest 4-day period of the year in the late 1971 to 2000 period. We've had 4 of those statewide this year. So one near the end of June, the one in the middle of August that I mentioned, and then basically that period from the end of July through the first week of August gets counted here as 2 different heat waves. It really was one prolonged one. So we've had 4 this year, and if we look at kind of an updated chart of heat waves in Colorado, this is for statewide, so it would vary a little bit from region to region. But this is the first 4 years of the 2020s, so 2021 through 2024, and there's 17 there, which is more than any of the whole decades from the 1950s through 2000. So we'll see. There's 6 more summers to go to add to this. We'll see whether it beats out the 2000s. That seems like probably a fairly good bet at this point. So the point being that we are seeing more and more of these kind of prolonged periods of hot weather in the summers. And one other kind of interesting stat on that we had from Fort Collins was it was our the longest string of consecutive 90-degree days, the period ending August 7th. So kind of from the last week of July through the first week of August, essentially 16 consecutive 90-degree days, which broke the old record of 14. So it was a prolonged period of heat. So the heat obviously is kind of interesting in itself, or notable in itself, but really, what the end result and impact of that was the wildfires that broke out along the Front Range. And so the biggest of those was the Alexander Mountain Fire west of Loveland. And there was also the Stone Canyon Fire near Lyons, which unfortunately caused a fatality. And the Quarry Fire down to the southwest of the Denver Metro. There was also the Gulcher Fire just last week that went up very quickly, but was also contained very quickly near Golden. So the kind of combination of the heat and the lack of rainfall along the Front Range set the stage for these fires to grow quickly, but now fortunately there's been some relief, and all of those fires have been contained at this point. So we can kind of zoom in on that a little bit. So at the Boulder Climate Station, it was the driest May, June, July period on record. These graphs go back to May 1st. The average conditions are this brown line here. And if you remember back to last year, that May through July period was extremely wet. Some places it was the wettest on record. At Boulder, I think it was like the 3rd wettest. But in any case, 13.6 inches over that period from May 1st through yesterday, August 25th or so. So over 13 inches last year. This year, through the end of July, Boulder had less than an inch of rain from May 1st through the end of July. There's been some storms lately, so now it's up to 2.9. So it just slightly crept ahead of 1974 from May 1st through August 25th, but it was the driest May, June, July period by quite a large margin at Boulder, and that I think is representative of the conditions around where those fires got going. And lastly, we can see this too in a quadrant chart. So this is just for the Northern Front Range and just for May, June, and July. And you can see it was one of the driest, not the hottest, but one of the driest such periods on record for that region. So certainly, something, the kind of climate connections to the wildfires were pretty clear through there. All right, so we'll kind of look at kind of synthesize that into the drought conditions now. This is a photo that Becky, as probably most of you know, Becky's moved on to a new position with Linker, but this is a picture she sent of the Alexander Mountain Fire at the end of July. That was pretty scary. Okay, so here's the current U.S. Drought Monitor map for the whole country as of last week. So this would be data through a week ago today. The new map will come out Thursday, so you can kind of see some of the spots around the country. The worst conditions are down in like southern New Mexico, West Texas area, but also some spots up in Wyoming and Montana in terms of drought. And here's the zoom in on Colorado, where we've got about a little over half of the state in D0 or worse, but in actual drought conditions, D1 or worse, only about 8% of the state there. And so we can see the spots that do have the drought are the Front Range, as we've kind of noted, and then some pockets in southern southeastern Colorado, where the rains have missed those spots. Here's how the Drought Monitor map has changed. This is a change over the last 4 weeks, and it's kind of a spotty mix of improvements, like in Larimer County, where we had quite a bit of rain in early August. It's a two category improvement there. But some spots with 1 to 2 category degradations in the southeast, where things dried out. And this is the change in the last 3 months, so going back to mid-May, and that's where the conditions along the Front Range especially pop out, where the May, June, July period was extremely dry. But then other spots with improvements, like in the southeast and in the southwest. A few different indicators that are worth looking at this time of year. This is EDI, the Evaporative Demand Drought Index. So this is a measure of the thirst of the air for water. You can see kind of those mountain areas that have had the good monsoon are in the near normal range for evaporative demand this is over the last month. But the Eastern Plains have been pretty warm, and pockets have had little precipitation there, so that kind of exacerbates the spots that do have drought there, and also showing some high evaporative demand over the northwest part of the state. Nothing compared to what they've seen in like California and Nevada, though, with the persistent heat there. Here is a similar type of information from our COAGMET stations around the state. This is showing the percentiles of water balance. So, anything higher than 50 would be sort of, wetter on balance than most years, or below 50 would be drier. There's a couple spot, well, don't the 4 here, the station at Clark, the rain gauge was out of commission for a while, so don't pay attention to that one. But we can kind of see a similar picture to what we've seen on the other maps, where, for example, spots in the northeast have been pretty wet. The Front Range area has been relatively dry. And then spots in the mountains and in southern southwestern Colorado have been quite wet, with good water balance over that period. So we can contrast a couple of those stations. We'll look first at Center here in the San Luis Valley. And this is interesting. So the evaporative demand at Center for the for the growing season back to April 1st is basically near average. So this year is the dark blue line, and then the long-term average is the black, and then the max and the minimum in there. So it's basically following the average for evaporative demand. But actually record high precipitation since April 1st, since that station has data back to 1992. So over 7 inches of rain going back to April 1st at Center, which is more than that station has ever seen over that time period. So the water balance on the whole, with near average evaporative demand, record high precip, gives above average water balance, among the few wetter years on the record there at center. And that contrasts with Lucerne in Weld County, where evaporative demand has been high. It was kind of running along the record high for a while, but that's with some cooler weather in August, that's dropped down below the record high, but still well above average up to this point. Precipitation has been below average by, that's maybe like a 3 to 4 inch rainfall deficit over the growing season. And so here it's tracking not at record poor water balance, but certainly down on the low end there. So that kind of gives a sense of the contrast between some parts of the state that are in quite good shape drought wise, and parts of the state that are not so much. Here's what it looks like in terms of soil moisture. This is shallow soil moisture on the left, deep soil moisture, 1 meter deep on the right. The blues are where the soil moisture is above average. The oranges and reds are below average. The deeper one is probably a better signal of kind of integrating conditions over time. So we can see, again, some front range spots where the soil moisture is poor, as well as down through southern Colorado and parts of the southeast plains. But then, like the San Juan Mountains and surrounding areas, the San Luis Valley have much above soil moisture, and also those pockets in the far northeast plains that have seen a lot of rain have, and like the Elbert Lincoln County area have much above soil moisture, above average soil moisture through there, at least as far as what this modeling system tells us. Okay, so we'll take a look ahead in the outlook of where we might be headed. In the near term, things are going to dry out for the most part over the next week, with the exception of some continued rain in the San Juan Mountains and also on the southeast plains. But it's also pretty common as we get to late August into early September is one of the drier parts of the year, for at least for eastern Colorado. So it's not too unusual to see it drying out over this period of time. And we kind of see that in the difference from average through here. These are, there's pockets that have a forecast of no rain over the next week. And that's maybe like, half to 3/4 of an inch of a deficit, whereas that deficit in wetter times of the year would be much larger if you went a week without rain through there. But still looks like it's going to dry out, be mostly dry except for the far southern part of the state over the next week. Just as one other like quick thing, in case you want, I mostly made these just to have like a quick look, to be able to look at all the individual days in those 7-month periods. So we've got those on our drought website now as well. So the top 2 maps are the same ones I just showed, and then there's the 7 days that make up the 7-day forecast. So none of these are particularly interesting, but when there is a big rain event coming in, for example, it's nice to be able to just look at one plot and see, oh, it's Sunday or whatever it might be that that's going to have the rain. So a little bit of a sidebar there. These are temperature forecasts from the global ensemble, mostly just focus on the thick black line with respect to the gray lines, which are the average. Largely over this goes out the next 2 weeks. Largely conditions are going to continue to be above average for temperature across most of the state. No indications of any like big cold snaps, although some days that'll be cooler than others. But also especially the low temperature average starts sloping down pretty quickly as we get this time of year. At least here in Fort Collins, there was a little bit of that chill in the air this morning, even though it was basically the average low temperature. So those keep going down. So we'll get start to feel some of that coolness just because of the change of the season. But for the most part, it looks like conditions are going to stay largely warmer than average over the next couple of weeks through the first week or so of September. And that's consistent with the CPC outlook. This is for the September 3rd through 9th period, which shows high confidence in warmer than average conditions across the West. with not much signal for precipitation across Colorado during that time period. All right, and then and then this is maybe, worth taking a look at. This is for September. Basically, is September a wetter or drier than kind of how much does September contribute to the annual average precipitation? So September tends to dry out on the Eastern Plains. It's not a particularly wet month there. That's what the browns are showing here, but it actually is still in some pockets of Western Colorado, September is the wettest month of the year on average. Like in some of the lower elevation valleys in southwestern Colorado, it's like the third wettest month on average for the San Luis Valley. So it is a time period when we do expect to still see that monsoon signal be pretty strong, especially in those areas. Okay, so let's kind of take a look at the longer range outlook then. The main message continues to be that La Nina is on its way back. We had, of course, El Nino last winter. We've been in neutral conditions for several months now. La Nina maybe didn't come back quite as quickly as some of the earlier outlooks were showing, but it's still high confidence that it's on its way. And so we can see, here's the kind of takeaway from the CPC discussion, is that La Nina will emerge during the September through November period and persist through the winter. And it doesn't, this one shows kind of the magnitude. So here's the probability. So we're seeing, right, 75% probability of La Nina by the winter. This is the magnitude. And so it's not predicted to be an especially strong La Nina, but the kind of signal is certainly there for that to play out. And what does that mean? It's always good to revisit this figure, which shows how does the precipitation evolve typically for La Nina versus El Nino for the different seasons here in Colorado. So basically, if you see blue, it means La Nina is wetter. If you see red, then El Nino is wetter. If we look at the fall, what we see is a lot of red, especially through eastern Colorado over to southern and western Colorado, which indicates that La Nina tends to be dry in the fall, and it's actually some of the strongest correlations that we see on the map are for dry falls when La Nina is in place. On the other hand, the winter actually tends, especially in the northern mountains, tends to be snowier during La Nina winters. So it's not all bad news when La Nina comes around. The winter season does tend to be favored for good snow in the northern mountains. And this just shows kind of that correlation between fall precipitation and the El Nino La Nina condition. So the fall El Nino or the fall La Nina will probably fall somewhere in this range here. And so we can kind of see the analog years here. There's most of those years were dry in the fall statewide. This is clearly not a perfect correlation, but it's one of the better correlations that we have between La Nina, or one of the stronger correlations we have between La Nina and precipitation. And if we look specifically at southeast Colorado, this is where that relationship gets even a little bit stronger, where again, there's a pretty strong tendency for La Ninas to be dry in the fall. Not every single one, but more likely than not. That's kind of what the long-term statistics show. And so that bears out in the NOAA outlooks. So this is the temperature outlook for the fall. And again, think of this as like a measure of confidence. The darker the colors, the more confident the forecasters are that it will be above or below normal. In this case, above normal, really across Colorado. So that's a big increase in the odds of a warmer than average fall across pretty much the whole state. Here I put the dot at Durango. So there it's a 66% chance of an above normal fall, 31% chance of near normal, and basically no chance of a cooler than average fall in southwest Colorado. Here's the precipitation version of that, which also tilts dry. Again, this is pretty consistent with the idea that La Nina is coming in and that La Nina is dry in the fall in eastern Colorado and really here kind of across most of Colorado. We can look out further into the winter, and then the signal kind of washes out. There's not a lot, there's a very slight tilt towards warmer than average. But this is also a pretty typical La Nina picture with cooler than average conditions across the northern tier, warmer to the south. In Colorado, we sit in the middle, so it's just not giving us that much information. And similar for precipitation. The southern tier of states tends to be dry during La Nina. Sometimes that extends into Colorado, sometimes it doesn't. So you can see, again, a tilt towards drier than average for the winter, but not a really strong signal there. So to kind of wrap up, I guess, with some takeaways, the water year up to this point has been a warm one. Through July, the 8th warmest on record. August will be a warmer than average month, so we'll see if that changes the ratings once August finishes up, and at least the outlook shows September likely to be warm as well. Statewide average, the precipitation is near average for the water year, but there's some pockets that have been wet recently, like the Western Slope and parts of the Northeast Plains and the Front Range. And then the dry areas have been the Front Range and Southeast Colorado. Drought persists along the Northern Front Range, where we had that really dry May, June, July period and the big fires, but at least there's been some relief lately to get those fires under, out and not growing further. La Nina will arrive this fall. And the CPC outlooks show high probabilities of a warm, dry fall across the state with a weak signal as we get farther out into the winter. So there's the usual information, how to get in touch with me, subscribe for our monthly updates. If you're interested in the seasonal forecasting, in a deep dive on that, check out Peter's latest blog post where he analyzed kind of the CPC outlooks compared to the Farmer's Almanac. And you might be curious to see those results. So have a look at that. It's kind of a fun and interesting analysis. So that's all I've got. Thanks for your time. Happy to take questions if there's some time.
Thanks, Russ. Yes, there is time. If anybody has questions, feel free to unmute yourself or put it in the chat.
And I saw there was chats, but I'm not sure if those are
Yes.
mostly just intros. So
Yeah, yep. And yeah, I shared the link for the quadrant graphs that you showed. So
sweet.
Yeah, I thought it was interesting when you were showing the Boulder temperature graphs. I think that was a good example of how climate change will just increase variability in precipitation, especially here in Colorado. So, because last year was like really a lot of precipitation, and this year is one of the driest. So
yeah, definitely the big whiplash in that, like along the Front Range, where we went from record wet last year to not that this year.
All right, well, if anybody has any questions, just put them in the chat for us, and we will move on to our next presentation. Thank you again, Russ. We have NRCS up next, and we have Nagam Gill subbing in for Brian today. So I think I said your name right. Please correct me if I am wrong, but I made you co-host, so feel free to share your screen whenever you're ready. Oh, you're still muted. And for everybody else, if you haven't put your name and affiliation in the chat, go ahead and do that. Oh, okay. Speakers aren't working, so she's gonna call in. Okay. All right, well, maybe in the meantime, we can do some water provider, water manager, municipality updates. If you are a water provider or water manager or municipality, feel free to come off mute and provide an update from where you are around the state.
Hello, this is John Orr, City of Thornton. Our production continues to be just way above 2023. But of course, as Russ just showed us, 2023 was wetter. So this is mostly outdoor irrigation, but year-to-date production is 22%, just under 22% above 2023. Our storage has been strong all summer and continues at 93% of capacity, just under 93% of capacity. And that's actually pretty normal for Thornton. Noting the drought conditions, and I may have mentioned this before, but Thornton has moved to drought watch. It's not based on storage, it's based on the appearance of drought in our watersheds. So we're taking, keeping a close eye on things, and then also increasing our messaging to let Thornton residents know that we're in drought watch and asking them to be efficient. So that's what I have.
Thanks for sharing, John.
Hi, I'm Karen Guglielmone with the town of Telluride. We're in the opposite condition. We are so wet, it is amazing, and we're having mudslides and road closures. Our supplies are very strong. What's limiting us is actually maintenance on our water treatment plants. So we're conserving with that. We're having to conserve just because of that maintenance. But the monsoons recently in this part of the state have been spectacular, and it's like it's springtime all over again.
Well, I guess that's pretty good to hear. Thanks, Karen.
Hi, I'm Beverly Richards and I'm with the Upper Gunnison. We are also very wet, very, very wet. As Russ showed, we're about 170% of average precipitation. So we have a lot of hay laying on the ground that can't be put up yet because it's too wet. Our water storage in the upper basin is about 76%. And that's just because they had to make some unanticipated releases out of Blue Mesa to meet the downstream uses. So, but basically we're wet, and it looks like it's going to dry out for the next couple of days. So that'll be I think, a welcome relief for some people, especially the hay people. Thanks.
Thanks, Beverly.
Nathan Elder with Denver Water. So our storage is 93% full. We typically be 92% full this time of year, so we're in good shape there. So far for August, demand's 98% of where we would expect it to be, so slightly below. And then total for 2024, our demand is 102% of average, so just a little bit above. So we're in good shape.
Awesome. Thank you, Nathan. Anyone else want to provide a little update? If not, are we ready to go?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. So sorry. I have a new computer and
No
all my
worries.
things are offline. Okay. So my audio is on my phone, and then I'll have the screen up here.
Okay.
Okay, awesome. Thank you all for your patience. Okay, can you see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Oh, and I'm seeing, oh yeah, okay.
Okay, awesome. So I'm with the NRCS, the Colorado Snow Survey. Brian normally gives this meeting, but I'm stepping in today because our team is on the road, working on a couple installs in the Upper Rio Grande, and also on the road this week too. So bear with me. Yeah. So my presentation is largely going to focus on precipitation in the form of rain, but would definitely be remiss if I didn't mention the recent snowfall outside of Telluride just recently. So just pretty exciting as someone who's passionate about the snow. Always exciting to see those early flakes. Yeah. Okay, but getting into the meat of it all for this month. So statewide precipitation is at 104% of median, reflecting near normal to slightly above average conditions across Colorado. The South Platte sits at 97%, while the Gunnison leads with 114 of median precipitation. The Arkansas is performing well at 110, and the Upper Rio Grande is above normal at 107. And then also the combined Yampa-White Snake region is close to median at 105. Precipitation across stations ranges from 18.3 inches to 47.9, with an average around 30.6. And again, that's water year to date. 7 sites, are nearing record levels, including Mask Lake Snowtell in the Roaring Fork watershed, and that is at 26 inches, so just shy of its 1995 record, which is at 28 inches. Let's see, that Upper Rio Grande has 3 sites near record levels, including Cochetopa Snowtell at 18.5 inches, its highest in 20 years. And then there's 3 sites in the Gunnison Basin that are in the upper decile for precipitation. In the combined San Miguel, Dolores, and San Juan Basin, precipitation is near or above median at 102, with the highest year being in 1997. All right, so for the over the past 90 days, Colorado statewide precipitation has averaged 118% of median. The Gunnison Basin leads with 175%, followed by the combined San Miguel, Dolores, and San Juan Basin at 174. The Upper Rio Grande is at 160, the Arkansas at 126. The Headwaters region has also been benefiting from these summer storms and is at 120. The Yampa White Little Snake region is closer to normal at 94, and the South Platte sits lower at 90%. So precipitation overall has ranged from 1 inch to up to 15 inches with an average of 7.2. There are 23 sites at or near record levels for this 3-month period, and 44 sites that have precipitation levels at or above 85% of their historical maximum. Okay. So over the past 30 days, statewide precipitation has surged to 143% of median. The Gunnison Basin leads with 226 of median, followed by the combined San Miguel, Dolores, Animas, San Juan Basin at 184. The Colorado headwaters at 163, Upper Rio Grande 156, Yampa White and Little Snake combined basins at 173, and the combined Laramie North region at 147, and Arkansas steady at 117. So there are 16 snowfall sites at or near record levels, with precipitation ranging from 4 to 7.8 inches for this 30-day period. Okay. So Colorado has definitely seen impressive month-to-date precipitation, reaching 198% of median. The Gunnison leads again with 287 of median. The combined San Miguel, Dolores, and San Juan at 237. The Upper Rio Grande 210. The headwaters and Yampa White Little Snake are at 206 and 170 respectively. The Arkansas Basin is also performing well at 157% of median. So for this period, there are 37 sites at or near record levels for this month to date. Okay, so so far in the water year, Colorado has accumulated 30.6 inches of precipitation, putting us well above the historical median. For comparison, the notable water year of 1995 reached a maximum of 43.6 inches, while 2019 saw 33. This places 2024 in a strong position relative to some of the more robust years in recent history. The period of record median is 17 inches, and the 30-year median is also close to that, 16.9. So meaning we are currently performing well above average or close to it. So looking at the historical data, the 10th percentile projection indicates a potential lower bound of 27 inches, while the 90th percentile suggests a higher bound of 38. So given our current totals, we're on track for a pretty decent water year. Historically, we've seen a minimum accumulation as low as 20.9. And the maximum reaching 43 inches. So again, with 30 inches already accumulated, and still over a month left in the water year, we're on track to potentially surpass some of the higher percentiles, depending on weather conditions in the coming weeks. Okay. So in the Gunnison, as of August 26th, this region has accumulated 114% of median precipitation, which puts it above the average for this time of year. We are currently at 104% of the water year median. So now with 34 days left in the water year, this performance places the Gunnison in the 67th percentile. So that indicating that we're above the long-term average, but not at record levels. With the current trajectory and historical patterns, Gunnison is expected to maintain a solid precipitation performance through the remainder of the water year. The accumulation curve shows consistent gains that align with strong historical years. So compared to recent years, 2024 is shaping up to be a strong water year for the Gunnison region. While we're not breaking records for the water year as a whole, this year is performing well compared to several past years like 2023 and 2019. Yeah. Okay, so for the Upper Rio Grande, this region has accumulated 27.7 inches of precipitation, which puts it above the current median, which is 26 inches. The region is also performing well. The 10th percentile projection is 24 inches, while the 90th percentile has an upper bound of 37, and the 30th percentile is at 27 inches, and the 70th at 32. So historically, for this region, the minimum precipitation has been 15.6 inches, while the max could reach up to 43 inches. In the combined San Miguel, Dolores Animas, San Juan Basin, accumulations are at 33.5 inches, which places it just above the 30-year median of 33, just right above that median. The current precipitation of 33.5 inches indicates that that we're tracking pretty closely to long-term medians, so reflecting typical conditions for this time of year. The 10th percentile projection is 29 inches, while the 90th percentile suggests an upper bound of 43.7. The 30th percentile sits at 34, and then the 70th at 38.72. So again, indicating variability as we close out the water year. Historically, precipitation has ranged from a low of 17.97 inches to a high of 51.64 inches, illustrating the variability across all the different water years. So again, with 33.5 current already accumulated, this basin is performing near the historical median. Depending on late season precipitation, total could shift toward higher percentiles. So in August, Colorado has received 3.6 inches of precipitation, placing it well above the historical median for August. This August is seeing stronger precipitation than 2022 and 2023, which had 3.1 inches and 2.8 inches of precipitation, respectively. The current month's performance is comparable to wetter years like 1999, which saw 3.9 inches in August, reflecting favorable late summer monsoon activity. The historical median for August is around 2.4 inches based on the period of record, highlighting that this year's accumulation is significantly, or for August, is above normal for this time of year. So again, but though we're not seeing record-breaking precipitation levels, this August is still well within the upper range of historical variability. So with 3.6 inches of precipitation in August, 2024 is performing strongly, showing consistent contributions for monsoonal activity, which are bolstering the overall water year totals as we near the end. Okay, moving on to reservoir storage. So as at the end of July, reservoir storage across Colorado has been stable and is at 97% of median, with most basins performing near historical medians. So the South Platte Basin shows strong performance at 102, while the Yampa White Little Snake Combined Basin is performing well at 107. The Upper Rio Grande the Upper Rio Grande is at 106, so also indicating positive reservoir storage. The Gunnison Basin stands out with reservoir storage levels at 89%, so slightly below average for this time of year. And then the San Miguel, Dolores, and San Juan basins are also slightly below median storage at 84%. All right, moving into soil moisture. So the mean soil moisture across all stations for 8-inch soil, 8-inch depth is around 20.4%, or volumetric water content. So with values ranging from dry, 0.2% to 40%. So a lot of variability there, but compared to previous months, recent monsoon conditions have helped improve the 8-inch soil moisture levels. Okay, let's see. So for the 76th percentile for the 8-inch soil moisture, values are above 31%, and are indicating some regions are retaining substantial moisture. So again, likely benefiting from the monsoon activity. So if this trend improves, soil moisture is maintained, and it's maintained into the new year. It'll definitely be beneficial during next year's runoff season, particularly in regions like the Upper Rio Grande and the Gunnison Basin, where retention is currently higher. Okay, so for the 20-inch soil moisture, the mean soil moisture across all stations is around 17.5%, with values again ranging down to near zero, so 0.2% up to 40%. And so yeah, the monsoon conditions have likely helped replenish these deeper soil layers, and as shown by the relatively higher median and mean moisture percentages compared to last month. The 76th percentile stations have 20-inch soil moisture values above 25%, indicating significant retention in certain regions. So particularly in like the Gunnison and also like the Southwest Basin, San Miguel, Dolores, and the San Juan Basin. So this wide range of variability from near 0 to 40% just shows, just highlights the benefit of the recent precipitation and deeper soil levels. And again, similar to the 8-inch data, these deeper soil moisture levels suggest that if this trend continues, it will be a positive impact runoff and improve water retention as we head into the next water year. To recap, monsoonal flow has provided substantial rainfall across southern and southwestern Colorado, especially benefiting the San Miguel, Dolores, San Juan, and Gunnison basins. Statewide precipitation is 104% of median, ranging from 97% in the South Platte to 114 in the Gunnison. Statewide reservoir storage is at 97%, so that's 2% improvement from previous months from June's reservoir levels. The mean soil moisture across all stations for 8-inch depths is around 20% and 17.5 for 20-inch sensors. We're not showing improvement from earlier in the year. And that's all for me. I'll take questions if there are any.
Feel free to come off mute or put your questions in the chat. Thank you for the presentation. Okay, well, I guess I see no questions. And I know we did a few updates from water providers before the presentation, but if anybody else wants to share, feel free to come off mute or put it in the chat. All right. Well, I hear none and see none in the chat. So that will conclude the August Water Conditions Monitoring Committee. Thank you all for being here. Our next meeting will be in September. I believe it is September 24th. Yes, the 24th. So I will see you all then. Thank you so much.
Thank you.